So here you can see, I don't know if you can see that well, but there's a broken section of the spring in here. Right here. It's hard to see it. Yeah, but it's broken off right in down here about where my finger is. And flopping around in there. So I'm about to go have a look inside. This little Depth Tech Wi-Fi boroscope or endoscope will let me see inside. See, it makes has its own light at the end. So I'm going to try to remove that spring, this broken spring right over here. I'm going to try to do that using a trick I saw a young man. I'm talking maybe he's probably 12 years old. He was doing this on a bench, and I'm going to have to work around a little bit around some of that, the rocker arm. But I'm going to try to do this on the engine by capturing the spring retainer and those clips there with these vice grips, and just pressing it in, and then using the magnet here to remove the little like keys that hold the valve to the spring. All right, so we'll see how this goes. One. And there's two. So there you go. See, that wasn't too bad. I'll just pull it out. All right. And there's a broken valve spring. And I didn't find anything on YouTube about this. And no idea how it happened or why it did it. So I'm just going to keep going. Okay, so there's really more good news than bad news here. The bad news is I do have a broken spring and I have to replace it. But the good news is the valve is straight, slides in and out right, makes a good seal against the seat, like a little suction cup feeling. And when I can rotate the engine to top dead center, this gets pushed against the air pressure, the compression pushes this against the seat and makes it even more difficult to remove. The push rod is straight, everything, no damage on either end of it. And I looked inside the cylinder with the endoscope. It's all blackened with carbon in there from poor combustion, but the valve, I pushed the valve all the way in here and was able to look at the back side of the beveled part of the valve, and that's the only shiny part on the valve. Everything else is coated with the blackened carbon. But I was able to rotate it in 360 degrees and I didn't see any damage on it, which makes sense because it's making a good seal. And so the next step is to bring the engine back to top dead center, and I'll stuff it with some rope. So I'm now in the sit and wait for parts phase of this project. I've been practicing with rotating the engine and getting it to the top dead center on a compression stroke. And I watch the videos where people demonstrate where if you're at top said dead center on a compression stroke, you'll be able to wiggle this a little bit, the rocker arms. And you won't be able to do that if you find the top dead center on the exhaust stroke, okay? It'll be super tight, and that is the way it's supposed to be. You want to find top dead center for the compression stroke by checking those rocker arms and checking for play. And another easy way to do it is if your rocker arms are really kind of close to spec already, the settings are correct, you can take a feeler gauge, and in my case I tried it on the exhaust valve, and it was almost at the spec, about 0.05 or 0.006, in between the two. And so that's pretty good. That's what it's supposed to be. But it also helped me determine that this is the top dead center on the compression stroke. And another thing I did, because it's a little bit of a pain to constantly be keeping track of where you are in the stroke and repeating that setting over and over. So I put a piece of tape on here because I didn't feel like taking the cover off. So I'm kind of using the grill screen there that's on top of the motor as a flywheel, and the case here is like the opposite, and just put a piece of tape across it and marked it. All right, so waiting for parts. Okay, so my parts order from the Green Parts Store came in today. I started out ordering through Jack Small Engines, and I tried to get the Kawasaki spring. And of course, this John Deere spring, here's the part number, is also a Kawasaki spring. But when provided by John Deere, they give it this part number. And it was going to take about 3 weeks to get it from Kawasaki, so I decided to go with John Deere, and it got here really quickly. So you can see there's a missing spring here. That's the broken one, and I got the other one down here. I'm going to replace both of them, and I'm going to use a technique that a gentleman, a 12-year-old boy, he might have been 12, 14 years old, did a great job using pliers. And I used these vice grips, and I just clipped it onto the spring, like onto the cap right there. And I was able to compress this one easily because it was the broken one. But I think that these are easily enough compressed for a small engine that I can do the same thing here. And I'm going to have to finesse this a little bit. Probably, I'm going to release the arm, push the arm in, release the push rod, and then let the spring, the arm come back out. And then there is plenty of room once you do that to bring the spring in. So it's just a matter of getting it compressed. In order to do this properly, I need to be able to have some resistance on the other side. So I'm going to stuff rope in through the spark plug hole here. So I tried to use this heavy rope to fill that combustion chamber with rope to hold this valve out, but it was just too hard to shove it in there. It wouldn't bend enough. So I used some paracord, had to use a lot of it, but it filled it nicely. This valve stem will not go in anymore. So I'm ready to try putting the spring on. We'll see. Quick note about this spring, this is interesting. As I expected, this John Deere part number for the spring, it is in fact the same part as the genuine Kawasaki part number, 490782068. It's the same part I originally ordered from the Kawasaki source, but it was going to take too long. All right, getting something done now. So this worked beautifully using this Hasit wrench, which I know not everybody's going to have, but I think you could still find a way to make it work with an open wrench or bend one yourself, or if you have some other kind of crow's foot, so you can come in around there with the interference from that rocker arm. So that worked great. And then this inner tube was perfect. It, gave you good friction on the surface so the tool wouldn't slide off, but it also had enough stiffness. I ended up doubling it up so that it would push those in. It took 3 tries, and ultimately what really mattered was putting a little oil. Put a little oil on these pieces. I used grease to hold them into the cap, But then after they were started, after I got them started with my hand, I then put a little oil on there so that the little ridges in these keepers could slide into the detent when I pushed it in. And I found also that the best thing to do was push like this, and with my other arm, I reached back here and used the back of the motor for opposition. And so I was literally squeezing the motor to put them on, and click, click, they went in. So initially I used this wrench to press them in, to press in the spring keepers on that valve stem and the cap. But they fell out while I was trying to press everything in to get this back onto the rod. And I decided to make another tool out of this PEX tubing or PVC with the rubber, and it does sort of the same thing. It does the same thing as that wrench, but it's a bit more secure, and it fits on there real nice. Now the challenge is to get that spring compressed enough to get this arm to go down enough so I can get the ball of that rod back in that socket. And we'll see. There we go, it's on. Okay, so I've gone through a couple different ways of compressing the springs on the head here. This one's finished now, I put it back together, but to get this, when this was flopping free because that rod was released and this arm was flopping out, I'd put this inside here on top of the cap on the spring and then press on it like this. I would get both friction, good friction from the rubber so it wouldn't slip off, and it would also, the rubber from the piece of inner tube would capture the little spring keepers in there and press them in, and it worked great. But I found an even better way. I retained this, continued to use this, the rubber sheet or the inner tube, but then made myself a tool and just cut it out the right depth so I could fit it over the rocker arm here. And the purpose was so that I could compress this, and then with my finger, I could push this arm in until it got deep enough on this side that I had the space to reinsert the push rod. And it worked great, it worked perfectly. And now I'm gonna do the same thing with the lower side, just so that I can, this spring didn't break, but I want to put a fresh pair in. So I've got another spring to go in here. This one looks fine, but it's just as old. This is a 1997 tractor. So let's see how this works. I'm going to push here, and I'm going to keep my thumb here to keep this rocker, the arm here in contact with the spring. And then as I push it in, this should follow, and then I can get the rod out. So here we go. Yep, there it is, got it out. Okay, that was pretty easy. And now that that's free out of the socket here on the arm, I can move this over like that. And now I have access to the spring here. And so I'll be removing this and replacing it. Okay, so this turned out to be quite a different process. Using this tool really didn't come in handy at all for the lower mount. It's free now. I ended up just pushing this ring. It's a totally different design. It's a circular ring with a portion that slides down over the valve inside, valve stem, and hooks. So I'll take this out, you can see that. You can see that there's just this little piece here that you just push in enough to free it from the valve stem and then displace it upward until it unhooks, and then the spring unloads and you take it right out. All right, there you go. I like this is easy. So it's an easy design. So the replacement spring is the same part number, same type of spring as the intake valve. The exhaust is the same. And looks like I just insert this on here. And then just the reverse of what I did earlier. Actually, this might be easier with this. There we go. That time that was helpful. I was able to just, you have to push it up a little bit above the axis of the stem so you can hook that cap or that ring on there. And just check it out, make sure it's tight. Yeah, looks good. All right, no problems. Then last step, almost the last step, put this back on. There we go. And then that goes back like that. And then I'm gonna compress the spring again with the tool I made. And then fiddle with this. I hope I don't block your view. And there we go. All done. Piece of PVC pipe. Okay, so what's left to do is just replace this gasket around the valve cover here. I got a new one from the Green Parts store, and they were really helpful. My local dealer, I would order things and be, weeks would go by, and they would tell me it was still in Spain or something. So I just started going with the Green Parts store, and everything I ever needed and good advice was immediate. I got to clean out this a little bit in here, and I'm going to adjust those valves or check them one more time, and then put it all back together, and we'll see how it starts. Okay, so it's all buttoned up. Got the new cover, the new valve cover gasket on. I put it on dry, no RTV, just like the manual says, and hopefully that's gonna work. Check the oil, put the wires back on, everything seems to be okay. So let's see if it starts. Choke. Power's on the dash.